Okay, design basics. Let's talk about our next project, and that's personal mandalas. So this project is going to ask you to reflect on who you are, past, present, and future, and you're going to also practice creating a dynamic, balanced composition. The learning goals are that you use all your knowledge up to this point, your knowledge about shapes and colors and values and rhythm, to create unique personal symbols that tell the story of who you are. That's learning goal number one. Learning goal number two is that create balanced compositions that demonstrate two kinds of symmetry effectively within your design. And we'll talk about what those two are. And lastly is that you're going to learn the basics of using Adobe Illustrator and demonstrate the ability to follow directions. You're going to be given tutorials where I walk you through different parts of Illustrator, and you'll be asked to follow those along and to see how successful you can be at that. So let's look at a few examples of these mandalas from previous students. There's all different ways students approach this project, and you can see the way they organize their elements, the different kinds of symbols that they use, the different ways they have color interacting. One thing that can be very successful with this project is using color harmonies and also really thinking about scale. So for instance, thinking about how the objects that you draw can vary in size, because that can make a more dynamic artwork when you have things that are a little small versus medium versus larger. And just how you're going to generally use line and shape and color to organize a radial design. So some really great examples of what students have done. So how you create your mandala, there'll be step-by-step instructions about how to use Adobe. But basically what happens is you have this little pie piece, this little sliver here, and you design one piece, and then you're going to replicate it 8 different times. And that's really all you do to create this radial balance. That will be one thing that you're doing, is creating radial balance. Everyone will definitely be doing that. And you can see, though, also when you take this pie piece and divide it in half, think about the balance that you learned. What kind of balance is this one? Is it symmetrical, approximate symmetry, asymmetrical, or radial balance? It's obviously not radial balance because it doesn't center around a point. It's a little pie piece, so it's not a circle. It can't be radial. And is it asymmetry? Are things on the left very different than things on the right? No, not really. Is it symmetry? And again, no, because things aren't the same. We have ice cream, we have newspapers, we have ribbon, we have a brush. So that leaves us with approximate symmetry. Things on the left have a balancing point on the right, for the most part, and that's approximate symmetry. That's the kind of balance that this person used to design her pie piece, and then that gave her this result for her mandala. So what you're going to do is you're going to get a pie piece, and you will take all those symbols that you created, you will pick the best ones, the ones that speak the most to who you are, and you'll arrange them within your pie piece. Now, as you do that, you want to keep a few guidelines in mind. You want everything you draw to be a closed shape, and that's because when you go into Adobe and you start to color in everything, you can only drop in color to something that is a closed shape. If you had a place where your Sharpie did not meet, you wouldn't be able to color that in. Nothing should touch the border of the pie piece. You could see in those examples you looked at, there were no divisions in the mandalas. We didn't have these kind of lines, and we don't want them there. So for that reason, you'll see why when you use Adobe, nothing should touch the edge of that little pie template. You don't want to draw anything too tiny, because anything too tiny is going to show up as black. It won't scale up very much in Adobe, so nothing really small. And lastly, you should be drawing your design lightly in pencil and then going over it with the 8mm Sharpie. That's the thinnest Sharpie that you have. And that'll give you a nice clean line to photograph. Now your challenges are you don't want to use trait symbols, and we will talk about what trait symbols are if we have not already. You also want to create a design that either demonstrates approximate symmetry or asymmetry. So when you design your pie piece, you want your symbols to either have a counterpoint or have asymmetry. And remember, asymmetry is a little harder to do. This piece here is really more asymmetry. Even though the stars kind of go all the way across, there's no counterpoint for the flowers. And these little flowers aren't really totally answered by this frame. So this is a little more asymmetry than symmetry, or than approximate symmetry. But what you want to do is when you arrange your symbols in your pie piece, think about how you can change the scale. So for here we have Some things are small, some things are large. How can your symbols interact? If you just kind of plop them on the artboard, especially if you ever, like, please don't put them in just rows, that can look super boring. And you are not boring, so you shouldn't have a boring mandala. So think about different ways your symbols can interact, how you can place them, and you can keep changing the design of your pie piece around as many times as you want to get a good design, but keep practicing how you can change up what you do. And think about also how dynamic or static your symbols are looking. For instance, here we have diagonal lines, we have curved lines, so it's keeping that movement really active and engaged. We don't have anything that looks like it's really standing still in this design. So that is going to be how you start. And then once you finish making your artwork on your pie piece, I'll be walking you through how to upload it to Adobe and convert it all into digital art.